Hey, Marsha, are you muted? I'm not hearing you. Let's see. I assume no one else is hearing her. I assume people can hear me.
How about this? Can you hear me now?
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
All right.
Good job. Good job. So good to see you, Marsha.
You too.
Were you listening to Virginia Walden Ford over in the other session?
No, I didn't. I didn't hear her.
Okay. So they might be going a little bit long. They still have a Q&A, so we've got a few people here, but we'll go ahead and get started, and then maybe a few more people will. Great pleasure to introduce Marsha Enright, whom I've known for many years. St. John's College seminar for high school and college students working in retired adults using the classic and modern texts across the ideological spectrum, including classical liberalism, free market economics, and the philosophy of a free society. So with that, I will let you take it away, Martha and Marsha, and give them your Great Connections talk.
All right. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, and I want to thank you and Chris Ankel and the other organizers for giving me the opportunity to talk to parents. Excuse me if I might be glancing over a little bit. I have to look at my notes. But I wanted to talk today about something that I think is often overlooked in education. The fact that throughout life, we all need inspiration to help us get through the difficulties and the dreary parts of life. But children and young people especially need a sense that they can experience great things in life, that life is an adventure and exciting, unfolding possibilities in front of them. And children and young people especially need a sense of hope and a sense that work is an important endeavor, that heroes and heroines are possible, and all these things to motivate them to work hard, to learn, and to want to achieve things. They want to know that there's glamour in life, that things can be wonderful. And that's something that Disney can be great at for children, right? Remember, no matter how much knowledge a child learns or how many skills they get, they won't succeed without great motivation. Young people need real self-confidence in their own judgment based on rising to real challenges and overcoming obstacles, not just attaboys from others. They need a strong sense of personally chosen purpose and of achievement, not just what others think they should do. And they need to feel that significant adults in their lives actually listen to them. About that, in the summer program that I run, the week-long Great Connections, it's for students ages 16 to 24, and it's chock full of work, knowledge, reasoning skills, and all kinds of great experiences, from an improv workshop to a meeting of the founder of a clothing store or of a factory or a pediatric surgeon. Many students have found it transformative, but to me, something one student said was very significant. He said, "You don't know what it means to us to be able to talk to you, an adult, as if you were listening, as if we were worth listening to." Now, unfortunately today, we have a schizophrenic culture. On the one hand, the business community is generally very optimistic and forward-looking, very achievement-oriented, and with a positive attitude about the possibilities for the future. They're ever seeking to find new and better products to offer more value, is the common phrase, and to have an exciting, challenging, and financially rewarding time doing it. Even so, Joe Lonsdale, who's the founder of Palantir, of Open Government, and Affinity, and many other organizations, has felt the need to start a podcast called The American Optimist in order to showcase the great developments happening. And it's worth a listen. So he's a little worried about things. So that's because, on the other hand, so much of the culture is filled with cynicism, resentment of achievement, intolerance towards different ideas and values, and a bleak picture of the future, with so many beliefs that humans and our technology lead to destruction. There's the drumbeat of climate change disaster. There's artificial intelligence boogeymen. There's the idea that capitalism destroys your soul if you work in it. And there's a stark lack of romance in sexual relationships. Think about the movie The Joker, which makes you sympathize with the villain. And Bruce Wayne who's Batman, is just an evil capitalist who doesn't care about anyone. In the movies, in stories, it seems like businessmen are more likely to be murderous villains than actual achievers. And that's really far from real life about who's actually murderers and who isn't. Or in the portrayals of Silicon Valley, the entrepreneurs are focused on lying, narcissism, and vanity. And that's simply not the case in the vast, vast, vast majority. It's a super minority of people who can be like that. I know the show Billions, to me, it's about hedge fund fellow, self-made hedge fund fellow. I thought it started out great, and then it ended up turning the hedge fund head into a real criminal, doing actual criminal activities. So that was a big turnoff. These kinds of stories, they turn the young away from business, capitalism, markets, and it encourages them to think working at Starbucks or a green NGO is better for improving life, despite the fact that capitalism is clearly superior for improvement. So how do we arm our children against this onslaught of depressing, disheartening, disvaluing ideas in our culture? Now, you're likely aware of the recent work on the importance of grit and resilience and optimism in success in life. But when the news, the TV, their friends, teachers at school, and of course, videos, tweets, and posts tell them the world is going to hell in a handbasket and humans are to blame, how do you nurture resilience and grit? And this is where I want to say that what art your child consumes is critical to their development, whether it's movies, videos, TV shows, images, music, books, statues, even advertising images. I mean lots of different things when I say art, not just fine art, not just paintings and sculpture. Now, why is that? That's because art encapsulates what's important. It shows you what's important about life, about a person, about a given experience. And children take that in. I noticed that my own grandchildren who live in 2 different cities, and they don't talk to each other about this, they all love Paw Patrol. This is the 5 of them. And Paw Patrol is a cartoon show for kids that's about very capable children and animal children characters who save adults and children in difficult situations, and they use technology doing it. So it shows the children watching it what's possible. It shows them how children can be capable and hardworking and achieving. And this is what 2 and 3-year-olds like to watch. Now, if you've ever paid attention to 2 and 3-year-olds, you know they're constantly challenging themselves. They want to learn what to do, what's the next hardest thing to do, whether it's to walk on an uneven surface or run down a hill without falling. So that's kind of the essence of what children want and need. They want challenge and the picture of what's possible. And if you notice, there's a huge fandom for superheroes these days. All these superhero movies have been coming out for the past 15, 20 years. And I think that part of the reason it's so popular is because we're not seeing real heroes in most of the other movies. There's not enough stories about real heroes. Now, you probably know about the Harry Potter books. I haven't read them myself, but I've seen the movies, and they show very capable adolescents. And so I think this is one of the reasons why they're so hugely, hugely popular. They also have a clear universe of good and evil, and they convey some deeper philosophical messages too. And I think children and young adolescents, they're looking for the picture of life and what's good and what's evil, and art can give it to them. Now, I personally incline away from fantasy, which is Harry Potter, and towards science fiction. And in that regard, Robert Heinlein's books are fantastic for young people. He's famous for his books, his juvenile science fiction like Starman Jones and Half Spacesuit Will Travel. He's famous among adults for The Moon is a Harsh Mistress and Stranger in a Strange Land, among many, many other books that he wrote. Well, anyway, Half Spacesuit Will Travel, it reminds me about great Westerns, which are many filled with strong moral stories, moral issues. Specifically, it made me think of Have a Gun Will Travel, which is definitely for older teenagers. It shows the hero in it overcoming challenges, creating new solutions, trying to use his reason and his knowledge to solve problems. It's a great example of what you can do in life. And movies like High Noon, Shane, and The Man from Snowy River, which is set in Australia, are also good ideas for adolescents. Westerns as a genre used to present strong issues of good and bad and overcoming serious challenges. And I think if you look, you can find a lot of them still. For children, what can you do as a parent guide? Well, I think you need to be aware of what they're consuming. You have to have conversations with them about negative things that they see. Remember, especially the older children, they too often dig in if you oppose something they like. So in the conversations, I would recommend avoiding opposition. I wouldn't say you didn't think whatever they liked was good. I'd just say that what about it made me uncomfortable, and leave it open to having a good conversation with them about the issues, or to give counterexamples of what you'd prefer to enjoy. Try to steer clear of stuff with subtle political or that negative cultural slant, if you can, in your choices for your children. But again, if a child ends up liking something that has those messages, I wouldn't attack it head on. I'd try to point out problems. So some suggestions I have, and I've put a lot of them in the chat with links for you. And I'm happy to communicate with you later about it if you like, is look for movies, TV shows, and videos with real heroes like Ford versus Ferrari, which is a more recent movie. Although it's a great story of a hardworking, achieving underdog who makes good and overcomes vast opposition. But again, it's set in the past. We'd like to see stories of real heroes that are actually in present day. Also stories with children and young people who face challenges and overcome obstacles, like Treasure Island or the movie Goonies. Or I think this is one of the reasons why the musical Les Miserables is so popular. Great stories of heroes, conflict, struggle, and redemption. There's also books that are inspirational for children, that show children that are capable. And I wrote a long article with many suggestions in it called Good Reading for Children, which I linked to in the chat for you. Sorry, papers are sticking. Another thing I would recommend looking into, I don't know about it personally, is anime or manga, because I know that there are good works there and that they're highly influential among young people. So you might want to look into those and see which ones you'd want to recommend to your children. There's lots of older movies and shows with strong moral compass, with a romantic view of things. And I don't mean just in love relationships, but the idea that life is wonderful, and great things can be achieved, even though there can be a lot of pain and a lot of hardship. That portray people who have courage and valor and work hard at their goals. movies like Captain's Courageous or The Big Country or The Seahawk or Robin Hood. And more recently, there's one called The Lost City, which is kind of a comedy, and Bridge of Spies, which is based on real events. There's also reality TV shows about different kinds of work that are very inspiring, like Undercover Boss, which always shows one employee who is exceptional in their work and gets rewarded for it. Or that there's that other one called Dirty Jobs that shows all kinds of possibilities in life, interesting jobs. There's also the question of music, because music can really shape your emotional life. And there's a lot of music out there today that has, of course, sexual themes and has a kind of a negative attitude towards life. And I think if you introduce your children early on to many different kinds of music, whether it's jazz, whether it's big band, whether it's classical music, whether it's hip hop, I think all of those can, especially ones with great melodies and great lyrics, it can give them a big palette so that when they run across the things that everybody thinks is popular, they have a more a bigger fund of knowledge that they can draw from and judgment about it. Another category that I think is very important is video games, because they're so influential on young people these days. And especially video games where the child is building or creating something or mastering some skill, they can be very valuable. I have on YouTube a series of YouTubes of conversations with different people about different aspects of education. And one of them is with a composer and a musician who's also a computer technologist, who are both very, they love video games. And I had a long conversation with them about what you can learn from video games and what's inspiring about them. In case you want to look at that, I also linked that in the chat. Lastly, I think it's very important for parents to convey to their children the value of their own work, how it adds to the world, no matter what it is, whether you're a cashier at a grocery store or you're the CEO of a company. Tell them when you come home from work, interesting things that happened in the day, or how you handled situations, or why you like your job, and give them the idea about why it's important to you. And that's very inspirational for them. There's a wonderful movie, a documentary called Call of the Entrepreneur, which I linked to in the chat. And it's about 3 different entrepreneurs, a dairy farmer, an investment banker, and a media mogul. Now, the media mogul is Jimmy Lai, who has been in opposition to the authoritarian government in China. He was in Hong Kong and he's actually in jail now about it. But so his story is very interesting in this. But the one I was thinking of specifically was the investment banker, because he said that when he was a child, his father would take him and his brother to their places of work. And he and the brother learned a lot about the kinds of things that their dad did and inspired him to become an investment banker. So I hope you'll see that I put a lot of resources in the chat, and I'm happy to put them elsewhere for people. I put a article called The Habit of Hope that I wrote, which is about how to have a optimistic but realistic attitude towards life. And I think it might be helpful in navigating things with your children to help keep up the optimism, but teach them how to be very realistic about it. My own project, The Great Connections, I have a link in the chat about it. And I'm now developing a new college called Reliance College that's aimed at encouraging autonomous and entrepreneurial young people. You could find that at reliancecollege.org. Please feel free to email me if you have any questions or if you'd like help or any more information. My email is marsha@reliancecollege.org. And thank you very much for listening. I'm happy to take questions now.
Does anybody have any questions for Marsha? Well, we're waiting for questions from the audience, Marsha. Could you say a little bit more about your college? You just got started on it at the very end there, and I think that might be interesting.
Yes, well, I could see what was happening in academia for at least 20 years. And I thought that people who want an education that is reality oriented, that uses the classics, that is oriented towards teaching people real skills like how to write, how to understand the personal finance, how to understand economics, and gives them experience and opportunity to do real work so they can try out the kinds of things that they might want to do when they graduate. That all these things were really needed. So recently we had an opportunity from a very generous grant to start developing this project. All of those things are going to go into the program in the college.
Will you say more about the optimism and the heroism, how that will play a role in the college level?
Yes, well, one of the things I like to do in my programs is to bring in very successful professionals in all different fields. I've had ballerinas, I've had factory owners, I've had financiers, I've had doctors, because I think that most people, when they grow up, they only know a lot about whatever was in their family and in their local domain, and they don't necessarily know about all the opportunities possible in life. And by bringing in somebody who is successful and still enthusiastic about their work, whatever their age, that's very inspiring to young people. They get a chance to find out, well, what is it like to navigate life as an entrepreneur, or was it like to navigate life as a doctor? And they get to talk to them one-on-one. So this is something we're going to continue in the college program, where we will have a stable of very excellent professionals to mentor the students in the program.
Excellent. And because I know you have a Montessori background, do you want to say just a little bit about how Montessori is kind of aligned with everything you've said?
Oh, yes. Well, Montessori, for those who don't know about it, is a very individualized and developmentally oriented philosophy of education. So one of the things I've done is taken the Montessori philosophy of education up to the young adult level, asking myself, well, what do young adults need at this point? And one of their main needs is to figure out what do they personally want to do in life, and and how do they go about doing that? What is going to be their place in the community of the world, and how can they create things that will make things better? So this is, and the other thing is, by using Socratic seminars that you're expert in, this is a way for students to young people to become very strong in their reasoning powers, but also in their ability to work with other people. Because in Socratic seminars, you really learn how to listen to other people and try to understand what they mean and what their terms are. And you also expand your reasoning powers by hearing all the different ways that other people reason about the same material that you're working on. These are some of the ways in which it's a Montessori approach, the individualization. And I also plan to have, as part of our program, something that's in Montessori is called the Great Lessons, which is helping students see the story of the things that they're studying. Why did human beings start studying the subject of math? What motivated them to discover algebra? How was it used? How is it related to the way we work? How did it affect history? What influence did it have on the way people could trade, for example, or could invent things? And I think that this kind of story is much more motivating in terms of wanting to learn things if you know the big picture of it.
Certainly makes sense to me. Lawrence attendee asks, what advice would you give a young person who is told by a peer that humans are destroying the environment?
I would advise that you go and look at some of the counter arguments to this. There's a lot of books out there now that examine the claims that we're destroying the environment and have interesting arguments about whether that's true or not and what has actually happened to the environment. I mean, just off the top of my head, for example, in the wealthy countries where we actually have more free markets and more capitalism, we've been able to be wealthy enough to clean up the environment way more than in other places in the world where they just can't afford it because otherwise they're not going to be able to live. I was trying to think of Bjorn Lomborg is somebody who's very interesting to follow in that respect. And oh gosh, it's escaping my mind. Michael Schellenberg, is it?
Schellenberger.
Yeah, Schellenberger has a new book out, but I can't remember the title. Do you know it?
Not off the top of my head.
Yeah. He examines a lot of the issues there.
Well, any more last questions? If not, many thanks to Marsha. Now we have a 15-minute break before we have Mikkel Thorup of Expat International School speaking on From High School Dropout to Millionaire. So enjoy your break, and we look forward to seeing you all at the bottom of the hour to listen to Mikkel Thorup and his amazing personal story. So thanks again, Marsha.
Thank you. Bye-bye.